think we can find some consolation in the fact that Jesus suffered, and we can offer our own suffering. I think people have their own little deaths in their own life in different ways, or their own feelings of isolation or distress, of death to something or someone that they thought was going to be a part of their life, and that we can find some courage and strength from entering into that mystery with Jesus' story and Jesus' life on Good Friday.
Recognizing the fact that Jesus is like actively suffering and sort of reinserting yourself back into that passion and death of Christ. It's a day of like sort of understanding our humanity, and that we're practicing Catholics. That's one thing I recently heard, and so I think that's a very powerful thing, is we're actively practicing at being Catholic.
The part that always gets me is when we process up and we kneel and we either kiss the cross, and for me, that's a time of literally kneeling in front of the cross and handing over my burdens, my cares, my worries, my anxieties. Like, I'm leaving it here. I'm leaving it here at the foot of the cross. So I think that's why it's so important to take quiet time, as much as you can. 15 minutes, half an hour, 45, an hour if you can, but to just reflect on what the Passion really means and what it means for you. How does it relate to your life?
I think the coolest part about Paul Bearers is just like hearing about the people's lives and like how they're remembered and how they're going to be like remembered in that way, but also the realization that there's a life beyond here and that there's a hope beyond. And I think you can see that in typically the priest, but also like the few family members that are there, is that there's that hope, and through Jesus Christ we have that opportunity. Life, it can be short. Like, how are you living your life each day that you're trying to, am I saying like, oh, I'll do that next week, I'll get the Mass next week, or it's that, no, today I'm gonna try, because we're all called to be saints in that way. And I think after people pass, you realize that they become a saint when they go to heaven. But I think similarly with Good Friday, you're reminded of the suffering and that time.
My uncle, who passed away several years ago from pancreatic cancer, he had encountered a lot of suffering previously in his life, and he always felt like God gave him so many chances to live a good life. And so even amidst his suffering, he was still able to see goodness around him and remind all of us who are really sad about that. And I think there is something there in Good Friday, that it's good to sit in the sadness and recognize the suffering of Jesus and the suffering that is very real in our world today, and to recognize that there's still goodness in our world.
It's one that I look forward to in a kind of strange way. Somberness is not something we normally think of as, I'm eager to enter into that. But for an afternoon and one day of the year, it's a good thing for us to do. I would argue it's an important thing for us to do. To remember Jesus' resurrection means we need to remember first his suffering and death, what he did, what he endured willingly for our sake. Only then can we know the joy of the resurrection, the celebration of new life.